In this week's episode from a Brit in Poland, I am showing you some sights near Wrocław. So I will take you to a 16th century castle, the biggest Cistercian monastery in the world, the biggest wooden church in the world, and perhaps on a lower note, we finish in a concentration camp. But this was an incredible day out. It was all achievable by car and easily drivable from Wrocław. So I hope you enjoy, stay tuned, and benefit.
Dzień dobry. Welcome to a Brit in Poland. This channel has a number of missions. The main one, to create a video for every place on this list. Though I could use your help. The help could be in a number of forms. You could like my video, you could subscribe to my channel, you could follow me on Facebook or Instagram, or you could donate to my Patronite account. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoy the video.
So thank you, Ricky and Wojciech. You give me inspiration to continue. So we're heading down to Lower Silesia, which is in the southwest of Poland. And we took basically a day trip from Wrocław, so you can see a rough idea of the route we took. And it was all achievable in pretty much a day. So the first place we're going to go to is Zamek Wojnowice, which is a Gothic Renaissance castle that was originally a knight's residence. And the site dates back to the 13th century. And on the ruins of that site from 1513 to 1518, a brick castle was built. And one of the things that makes this castle somewhat unique is the fact that it is on the water, which you will see very shortly. The castle was kind of further developed, let's say, between 1562 and 1590, where another stage of the construction gave it a kind of a spatial layout which has been preserved to this day. And the shape closely relates to the style of late medieval Wrocław. And actually, it was only really damaged during World War II. So it's really stood the test of time, this place. It's now owned by the College of Eastern Europe Foundation, what's happening with my words today, and serves primarily as a restaurant and a hotel. So we didn't have time to go inside. You can organize tours, but I believe they're only at certain times and you have to kind of book it in advance, and it takes about 45 minutes. But it was a lovely first stop, because I'm always keen to see a new castle. And these places, they always have a certain charm. Perhaps not one of the most dramatic castles in Lower Silesia, but certainly one I'm glad that I got to see. So, looking forward to seeing more castles as time goes on. Now, the next place we're going to is actually on my poster from the intro of the video, so I'm really happy to tick this one off. And it's the Klasztor Cisterciów w Lubiążu. God, I need to practice my Polish. Now, this is the largest Cistercian abbey in the world. You know, the roof area occupies about 2.5 hectares, and the length of the walls is basically 223 meters. So it's a pretty impressive site. It was built in 1150 on the ruins of a fortified settlement. And over the centuries, the owners of this monastery became the largest landowners in Silesia. So, yeah, you could say this place had a lot of power. And this is kind of further exemplified by the fact that it contains a number of burials of pierced princes. Well, I say burials, actually their mummies are preserved. Unfortunately, we couldn't get down into the chamber. And you'll find, people such as Bolesław the Tall, Władysław Spindleshanks, Henry III of Głogów, Bolesław III the Extravagant, Jan Ścinawa, Conrad VI. So you've got a pretty big collection. Unfortunately, the Russians in 1945, while looting this place, managed to kind of damage the mummies. But anyway, like, they've identified one. So the site was actually burned down during the Hussite Wars, and it was rebuilt towards the end of the 14th century. In the 17th century, the library and the archives were plundered, and the collections were taken to Cistercian and burned. And a great renovation took place under the abbot and Baroque painter Michał Wilman. And he actually spent the rest of his life, upon taking on this project, decorating. So he was, an incredible painter, as you can see from like some of the works, especially the ceiling works here. And during 1810, the Prussian king abolished the Cistercian order, and a hospital was established in the monastery, firstly military, then psychiatric. During World War II, citizens from Luxembourg were interned here, and a factory of precision military equipment was established. And there was a fair bit of treasure hunting that happened here. The monastery was kind of constantly looted, because, of course, the church normally has quite a lot of gold, quite a lot of money. But also there were a number of relics and things. But it was a potential site for Hitler's lost gold, and you never know, it might be buried there somewhere. And here you basically had a tour, so you have to go with a tour guide, and tours are on the hour. It was only about 25 zloty, and I think you paid like 5-10 zloty to have like a photo pass. And it was a really, really cool place. I mean, the tour is in Polish, but they do give you like a handout in English, so you can still follow what's going on. And like, this is one of the, like, I think it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, maybe. It's certainly, you could say, kind of a modern wonder of the world. It's so immense. And of course, not everything is perfectly preserved, but what has survived or what has been reconstructed is breathtaking. The level of artistry that went into this place is outstanding, and you're just surrounded by beauty. And it really has a kind of mystical aura to the place. You wouldn't be surprised to hear of some ghost stories here, because when you were wandering around, it did feel a little bit creepy. I don't know, there was that energy in the air, but it was a really nice place to see. We probably needed about, I don't know, like 2, almost 3 hours. But yeah, really cool. Now the next place, Kościoła Pokoju w Jaworze, is one of the largest wooden churches in the world. So Poland setting a number of records here. Added to the UNESCO World Heritage List in 2001. It was built in the second half of the 17th century by Silesian Lutherans after pressure from Sweden to basically have like a Protestant church, because of course Catholicism was all the rage at that time. But in order to build it, there were quite a number of restrictions that were placed on the construction of this. So it had to be made of perishable materials, so wood, straw, clay, sand, that kind of thing. And it had to be outside of the city limits, but still within a cannon shot of the city. It couldn't have towers, bells, or be like a traditional temple shape. And the construction had to be completed within a year, and it had to be paid for by the Protestants. However, they were able to secure funding from a number of countries that were kind of Protestant friendly, and quite a lot of money was raised within Poland, with a lot of the materials for the church donated by local craftsmen. Now, originally there were 3 churches of this design, one in Głogów, one in Jawor, which is this one, and one in Świdnica. And only 2 of them remain. So this one and the one in Świdnica, which I will hopefully visit one day. The third one in Głogów was destroyed by a lightning strike, which is, quite detrimental to wooden structures. There are 4 stories of galleries on the north and south sides, and the windowsills of which are decorated with paintings illustrating the Old and New Testament, as well as landscapes with castles and heraldic shields. And I've never seen anything like this building. I'm so glad that I got to see it. And again, you pay like a pittance to go inside. And it was really cool. I can see why it's got UNESCO status, because it has to be very well protected. I mean, you have to think this is all kind of wood, so one fire and poof, it's gone. But you didn't really need too long to look around it, maybe about an hour or so. But it was really cool, and I'm really glad I got to see it. So can't wait to see the next one in Świdnica one day. Now, the final place that we're going to go to is Muzeum Gross-Rosen w Rogoźnicy. And this place is a concentration camp. And I think you will be fairly familiar with the sort of stories. But this place was not, let's say, as famous as, Auschwitz and Treblinka and places like that, because there were no gas chambers here, as far as I can tell from my research. A lot of people died, but there were no gas chambers. So it wasn't like a mass execution site, like a lot of the camps that you find in Poland. So this was more of a hard labor camp. And it existed in the years 1940 to 1945. And originally you had about 100 prisoners who were there. And the primary function of the camp initially was to mine granite. So you have basically a quarry right next to it, and this is where the workers would basically be doing most of their toil. And they would also be used for construction work, because like with any of these sites, the prisoners were used to kind of expand the camp, and they would have been used to help build some of the other camps as well. In total, you had 125,000 prisoners that would basically pass through this camp, but about 40,000 of them would die. And typically they would die from a number of causes, including malnutrition, overworking, and disease. In terms of executions, there were about 2,500, we don't know the exact number, Soviet POWs that were basically taken here and killed upon arrival. And in terms of the diseases, there were outbreaks of typhus, for example, in the camp, and there are a lot of stories. And there wasn't really like a hospital on this camp. I think there was a small field hospital, but basically a lot of the prisoners, when they would get too sick, would be taken to larger hospitals in the area. And the dead, well, initially they would be burned in the crematorium that they had there. Though from 1944, they started to take them to a nearby cemetery, which I think was built for the purpose. And the average day was about 12 hours for the poor souls who had to go here. They would be fed on starvation rations. They didn't have proper medical care in the camp. And it was actually considered one of the hardest concentration camps for anyone to be stationed in, because of the extreme work that was going on and the rather poor conditions. So you primarily had Polish people interned at this camp. You would have a few Jews, but I think, to be honest, mostly the Jews would kind of pass through here and would be sent on to other places. And you actually had a lot of members of the French resistance kept here as well. So you had quite a range of prisoners here, perhaps not as many as like Auschwitz or somewhere like that. And from 1944, this camp became like the head of like a number of camps in the area. So there were some 100 other smaller camps in the kind of, let's say, neighboring vicinity. And this was like the headquarters. So this is, why it's been preserved to this day. And as you can see, like a lot of it was demolished over the years. So you pretty much have foundations and a few monuments left. Sadly, we only had about 45 minutes here because we had to get back to Wrocław to catch our train. So I got to see all of the main site, but I missed the museum. So a lot of the research I've done on this place had to be done online. And it is, one of these very emotional places. I mean, you don't have perhaps the same kind of feeling to it as you would in, say, Auschwitz, but what it really tells you is what life was like. It gives a really good representation of how a prisoner's day was, what kind of ordeals that they would have to go through. And like any of these camps, it is a reminder that we should not forget history and we should not forget what people can be capable of. And this really, it brings so much to life that many people would rather is forgotten. But one thing about Poland is they will never forget what happened in their country during the war. But thank you very much for watching. Please stay tuned. More videos to come soon. Do zobaczenia.